Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Monday, the 16th of September. My apologies that there wasn't a gospel on the go for yesterday. When I got home from up north last week on Thursday, worked all day Friday, and absolutely crashed this weekend. I got a bit of I left when Rob had a cold, a bit of a sinus infection, and I got home and I picked it up. So feeling a lot better today, and here we are. On the way to work this morning, I was listening to the news, and I heard an interesting discussion about the Good Samaritan in an odd place. It was not someplace there you'd think they would be talking about the Bible, but they were talking about interpretations of the Good Samaritan and the importance of thinking of that in our political realm these days. And it makes a lot of sense for me because although they were talking about it from an American political perspective, from the Canadian perspective, I think it makes sense as well, because we are in a tumultuous time in our Canadian politics. And whether or not you think that God has anything to do with politics, I believe that God has everything to do with everything. So it is a part of who we are. And how we respond to politics and society and the changes in society that are brought about or stopped by politics, that is important for us as Christians, as people who are faithful people. So I do pay attention and I do listen for these things. And I found this particular take interesting. For those of you who don't know it, the Good Samaritan talks about a traveler who was walking down the road and he was attacked by robbers and thrown in the ditch for dead. And a priest walked by and said, "Nope." He walked to the other side. I'm not going to deal with him. And then a Pharisee walked by and said, "No, I'm not going to deal with him either," because the interpretation I've always thought of was that they were to touch this dead person or to even go near him would make them unclean. And that it wasn't they were being callous or something. It was against the rules they've been taught. And I'll give them credit for that give them the benefit of the doubt that they believed that they were doing the right thing, that they had been taught all along that to touch a dead body would defile them, which would mean they wouldn't be able to go to the temple, they wouldn't be able to pray, there would be a whole lot of things that they would be stopped from being able to do. And then along comes a Samaritan, someone who is unclean according to the Jewish laws, someone who is from another country, and he has the courage to stop and help this person discover he's not dead, takes him to an inn, pays the innkeeper to take care of him, to get him medical help, and then says, "I'll come back and pay whatever else I might owe." And that's the Good Samaritan. But the interpretation I heard on the news this morning was talking about the Good Samaritan the way Martin Luther King Jr. talked about him. And that it wasn't so much that the Pharisee and the priest were being jerks, and maybe even not so much that they were just worried about becoming unclean. They were fearful. The reason why they didn't approach the man in the ditch was because they were afraid. Afraid because if this man had been mugged and left to die in the ditch, then that's not a safe place to be. That if they stopped and slowed down and tried to help this man, they would make themselves targets as well. And they were afraid for their own lives. And when we look at that particular parable in that way, it sheds an awful lot of light on how we are responding in our world today to things. Because it seems that we have become a world full of fear. I don't think that we have as many callous people as it looks like when we talk about all the ridiculousness about immigration and people eating cats and their cats and dogs and all of the malarkey that's coming out of the States right now. I don't think it's because that people are responding the way they are because they are callous or bad people. I think people are scared. For instance, way back in the day, not all that long ago, when lynchings would happen, the people who would do the lynchings in the Deep South, the people who would attack a black person, a black man, because he allegedly did something to a white woman. I think the initial people, the 5 or 6 people who attacked him, they were evil. They were bad. But I think the people in the towns around them, the people who rallied and thought that what would happen was right, although they were wrong, I don't think they did it because they were horrible, hateful people. I think they did it because they were scared. They believed the lies that 5 or 6 people would tell about this person or that group of people being harmful. That they could, if they did that to somebody, they could do it to them as well. They believed in this. They believed in the lie that was being perpetuated, and they didn't have the ability or the sense, because of the hype and the excitement and the whirlwind of emotions that were happening. They weren't able to take a step back and say, wait a minute, does that really make sense? Does it make sense that that little boy who grew up in the neighborhood and played ball with my kids even though he wasn't supposed to, or even to go, like, for those people who worked as servants in homes, he grew up in that shed in the back, in that cabin in the backyard. He never hurt anybody. He was a good kid, but now he's all grown up and everybody says he's bad. They didn't have the time. They didn't make the time. They didn't necessarily have the ability or the desire. Think back to ability, but people's ability to think critically, to sit down and say, does this particular scenario make sense? And Martin Luther King's take on the Good Samaritan makes sense. Were the Pharisee and the Sadducee, or who the scribe and the priest, were they really, really evil? Were they really that callous? Or were they scared? Had they believed the lie that had been told for so long about those other people? The people who didn't look like them, who didn't worship like them, who didn't think like them, didn't speak their language. Had they just bought into the lie that those people were not just bad, but evil? Were they scared? Were they scared of what would happen to them if they actually touched the Samaritan man? Were they scared of that road that they were hurrying down, that if they stopped, that maybe their actions or their lack of action wasn't so much out of callousness, but out of fear? And how many decisions are we making individually, as communities, as provinces, as a country? How many decisions are we making not out of good, solid, critical thinking about the situation at hand, but how many things are we thinking about is in fear? How many people in Canada are worried right now and are whipped into fury over our current government because they believe that our economy is tanking, that they believe that this is the end of the world? And how many people are able to sit back and say, wait a minute, how are things really going? How are things going compared to the 2008? How are things going compared to the 1980s? How are things going compared to the wars? And to take a close look and say, wait a minute, maybe we need to not buy into the rhetoric. Maybe we need to not buy into the $1 billion ads that are on TV that are slashing and burning down everyone in their path. Maybe we need to pay attention to common sense. Maybe we need to take a deep look inside ourselves and say, what is it that we fear? And is what we are fearing truth? Because I think if we all sat back and took a look, none of us on either side of the border are really fearful about immigrants. After all, most of us, probably the bulk of those who watch this video, were immigrant families at some point, a generation or so ago. Is it really that we're scared of? Or are we just buying into being told that we're supposed to be scared? We need to think for ourselves. We need to learn to act as the Good Samaritan and recognize that when we start, if the people walking down the road that was so dangerous started looking out for each other, it wouldn't be long before that road wouldn't be so dangerous, because the robbers would know to stay away. The people will not let us do what we've been doing. Maybe that's what we need to do. Make the road safe. Make the road less fearful. Make the road be a place of community instead of breaking community. Have a great day. God bless you, and I'll see you all again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael. I promise. God bless.